Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. Today I'm going to begin the work on my larch forest. The buds are just starting to break. You can see the green needles starting to come out. This forest was kept in the unheated poly house over the winter, so it's quite a bit behind the larches that were grown here in the heated greenhouse. Here is a look at the larch in March. So I'm going to clean up the landscape. I'm going to clean up all the needles that have fallen down from fall, and I'm going to prune up the structure of the trees. Over the last year, I kept this larch forest in check. I didn't let any shoots grow wild or anything. I showed it in the Toronto Bonsai Society fall show, so I wanted everything to look nice and compact with good ramification, and managing the forest over the summer achieved that goal of keeping everything under control and compact. So now that the trees are bare and you can see what shoots are alive and maybe what ones have died off, it's a good time to prune the larch. I find that working on this larch forest, cleaning up the landscape and pruning up all the trees, takes me a couple of days at least. It's a big job. There's a lot of branches on these trees, and it's meticulous work. You've got to examine each branch. So I'll show you some of the areas that will require pruning, and I'll try and explain why, I need to prune the trees. When you grow trees in a forest, it's quite different from having a tree in a pot by itself. The trees, if you let them grow too wide, the branches from each tree starts intersecting with the tree beside it, and you end up with like a tangled mess, and light doesn't get to the lower branches. So you have to keep the trees in a forest pruned to a profile shape. And in this case, I'm pruning them to a conical shape, typical of the larches I see around this area. When I'm pruning today, I'll be looking for branches that are starting to interfere with each other and shortening them to keep each tree as a separate individual tree in the forest, without overlapping branches. Another thing I'm looking at when I prune up these trees is taper in the branches. So the branches should be their thickest where they emerge from the trunk, and they should get finer and finer as it gets towards the outer profile. So some of these branches, let's look at this one here. You can see that it's quite thick out at the tip here. So eventually, some of these thick ones will have to be pruned off and replaced with finer foliage to keep it kind of fine and delicate towards the outer part of the conical shape. I'm also looking at branch direction. So if I look from the front view, I want my lower branches to either be horizontal or cascading a bit. As I go up the tree, they become more horizontal, and then as I get up in the apex, they become more upright, as you can see on this tree. That's a good example. You can see this lowest branch is a cascading branch, and then as I go up the tree, they become more horizontal and then finally upright in the apex. So that's what I'm trying to achieve with the trees. Larch trees are very dominant in the apex, so a lot of vigor goes to the top of the tree, and if you leave them unchecked, you'll get the top of the tree thickening up more than the bottom of the tree, so you'll start to get inverse taper. I did have to do a big cut on this tree. I'll show you what I pruned off. So here is the top of the tree that I pruned off. It came off right here. So I replaced the apex, which was getting really thick and coarse looking, with a branch that is slowly rising up and becoming the new apex of the tree. Apex management is really important on these trees. Always replacing, thicker parts of the apex with thinner branches, keeping the apex under control. So I reduce the branches in the apex back to the minimum so they don't have as much vigor, and so the vigor is more evenly distributed from the lowest branches up to the top branches. So it's important to manage your trees for the future. Otherwise you get, big, thick, ugly apexes on your trees. Another thing I'll be looking for when I'm pruning is straight branches. So you can see some of these branches here are quite long and straight. So I'll be pruning them back to some buds that are closer to where the branch emerges, and eventually, creating taper and movement to the branches. And you can see the effect of the pruning over the years. You get nice movement to the branches and good taper, and it looks very, very natural. So that's some of the things I'll be looking at when I'm pruning the branches, what I'm looking for in the trees. And also part of it is the landscape work. You can see the moss is growing really thick and needs pruning up. Otherwise it'll just become big and thick and lumpy over the summer. So I'll need to manage the landscape, clean it all up. So there's a lot of work in this forest, but it's worth it. I really enjoy looking at this forest. Sometimes the sun hits it from an angle and it just looks totally different. It looks different on cloudy days, sunny days, and it's a really enjoyable thing to have. I have a playlist for this forest which shows you many of the steps I've taken to get the forest to this point so far. Some detailed pruning videos, landscape work videos. So today I'll be showing you a little bit of the pruning. I can't show you, pruning every branch because every branch is different, and the video would take 24 hours, maybe 48 hours at least. So if I find things in the forest that are kind of unusual or I have to make some big decisions, I'll show you those. But otherwise, I'm just going to work away on the forest, pruning it up, keeping all those points about the branches and the tree structure in mind as I'm pruning. And I'll work away, and eventually, in maybe a couple of days, it'll all be finished and ready to grow for spring. I'm going to make my first kind of significant cut. If you look at this branch, it's getting a little thick at the tips, especially this one. And this part of the branch is kind of growing upwards, and I have a better cascade branch below, and this one's more horizontal. So I'm going to prune off this back part of the branch. So here I go. I'll come in here and cut it off. Just like that. So now you can see that this branch is flatter. It's a little more delicate out towards the tips. And eventually, this branch will get cut off, and this will be the new branch leader down below, keeping that branch kind of cascading. If I pruned off this upper part now, it might weaken this branch too much. So you've got to do it in stages, kind of slowly refining it each year. Sometimes my branch pruning isn't successful. If I look at this branch here, I had pruned up this part of the branch to buds, and instead of, growing, it died off. The branch is still alive. I have this tip here, but I lost this part of the branch back here. So it happens. I noticed in the apex of the one tree, I severely pruned it back last year, and I got this branch died off. The one back here died off, but there's lots of branches in the apex here to replace them. I just took that one back too hard. I had a couple of branches fail there from pruning, but I think that's the only ones that I see that didn't make it. All the rest did really well. So it's just, how far back do you take them? Sometimes I overdo it and you lose the branch. But most, I would say, 95% of them or 99% of them, the pruning was very successful. Another example of pruning here is you can see the new shoots from last year. They're quite long and straight. So I have, buds all along the length of that branch, so I can at least prune the tip off, keeping my buds further back. And this one, I've got a very strong bud at the tip here, and I've got a lot of back buds, so I can take off the tip here, like that. And that just shortens the branches. Every time you prune, you get a little bit of taper and movement to the branch, and over the years it adds up and you get a very realistic branch that looks in scale with the tree. There's a dead tip here I can take off. Like that. This dead part of the branch back here, the one that didn't make it, I'll just leave it on. It's part of nature. You get branches that have died off. I just leave them on the tree. So on this branch you can see there's an upright part to it, but I leave that on as long as, you know, it doesn't extend too far. In future maybe this bud will elongate and I'll get some up and down movement to the branch. So I don't see anything else I'd want to prune on this branch. It's all looking quite good. Here's another example of a branch. You can see it's grown from here and it goes straight. So I can prune that back. I've got a bud back here, I've got one here, and a pair of buds here, and one at the tip. So I can at least take it back to here. And I could even take it further, but these buds are kind of shaded out by the branch above it. So I think that's as far as I'd want to go on that branch. And you know, there's nothing kind of flowing out in the radial direction of the branch, so it may have to get pruned in the future, or you know, wait until I get one of these buds to grow and then eventually get a bud going the direction that I want the branch to grow in. There's a tip up here that's growing vertical. I'm going to take that off, keeping the flatter part of the branch. And then this branch I'm going to prune back to here. This branch grows back in towards the center of the tree, so I'll take that off and I'll prune this one back. This branch here, this vertical one, didn't make it, so I'll prune that off. This is a stub I can remove there. I can prune this dead tip off here. And that's got this part of this branch pruned up. I'm looking at this branch here, and you can see there's some vertical growth here that I've pruned back, and it's subdivided into two branches. But I've got enough foliage down below that I can prune this upper part off. Like that. And that flattens the branch out. I can clean up a few of these stubs that have died off. There's a vertical one here. I can prune the tip off. I can prune the tip off this one. And I think that's quite good. I have a nice bud on the bottom of the branch in here that can eventually become the branch leader as it strengthens up. I'll prune this one back a little further. I got a bud on the bottom here. So I'll take the tip off. And I think I'll remove this upwards growth because I have another bud back in here. And I think that branch will be strong enough. It's looking quite good. As I'm working away today, I'll be cleaning out all the old needles that have fallen down, you know, amongst the branches of the tree. Yeah, just giving it a good cleanup. In the apex of these trees, I want to prune them back as compact as possible. So I always go back to the shoots that are closest to the trunk line, removing any long parts. And then I also sort them for vigor. So you can see this branch is getting a little vigorous, so I'm going to prune off this part of it. I've got a cluster of branches at the tip here, so I need to pick which one I want to develop, and I think I'm going to take this one off. It's getting very strong, using my upright apex there. I'll prune this branch back. You know, losing ramification, but that's what you want at the tip. If you have too many shoots here, you'll get a big thickening at the apex of the tree. So here's one. You can see there's a vertical shoot here I need to take off. It's getting too thick and vigorous. Like that. Take this dead tip off there. That's about all I can do there. Out here you can see I've got 3 branches growing from one spot, so I'll take off that one. This one I can take. This is an extension out here, but there's some buds back closer to the trunk line, so I can take the whole end off that branch. And also this one here. And then I may need to, it's always good in the apex to have, you know, possible replacements. So say this top got too thick, I could cut it back to here and develop a new apex. So it's something to keep in mind, is always to have a replacement apex if possible. And I'm thinking this branch is getting very vigorous out the back here, and it kind of goes in behind the apex of the tree, so I'm going to take that part of the branch off like that, simplifying it a bit. Yeah, I think that's about all I can do in the apex of this one tree. There's some work I can do in the lower branches, but it's kind of got the apex simplified and cleaned up, ready to grow for spring. Here is a good example in this area. You can see it's just a mass of fine twigs. It needs pruning back, so I can go prune these vertical ones back. Nice and short. I can prune this one back. This vertical one back. This vertical one back. These ones can be shortened. Shorten this. And I'm using directional pruning, looking for shoots that are fanning out from the tree. Dead branch there I can prune away. This one can be shortened way back to here. This one back to here. So really reducing these branches back. A dead branch here I can prune away. If I let those grow, it would just be, you know, just dense kind of clutter. There's one growing from the inside here I can remove. Another one here that's too long. Shorten that one. Shorten this one even more. And take the top off that one. There's a dead branch here I can remove. I'll take this vertical one right out. There's too many branches growing in this area, so I'm going to take out this upper one. Making my branch a little flatter. Take this one off. Reduce this one back. Dead one here I can take out. There's a vertical one here I can cut back. Take the vertical part off there. Actually, I can shorten that more. Keeping these branches nice and compact. Now I could take this one back even further, and I will. And this one, this one, this one. Dead branch tip here I can prune back, and here. As you can see, this area is much better now. It's sorted out. And much more compact. There's one growing back in towards the center of the tree here I can take out.
Then this lower branch, I need to prune that back also. There's a long branch here. Take it back to there. There's a branch crossing everything here. I'll take that out.
One thing I've noticed with the pruning this spring is that there's a lot less pruning because I kept the trees quite carefully controlled over the summer. And yeah, there's a lot less of, wild branches sticking up and interfering with the other trees. So I'm going to continue that strategy, carefully pruning the trees and pinching the needles back and keeping the trees under control over the summer. I have finished pruning up the larch forest. I'm sure there's a few branches I've missed, but I'll, clean those up if I see them later on. But yeah, the basic structure is all pruned up. So a lot less pruning this year because I kept the trees controlled. And it's looking good. I like it. Lots of ramification in the branches. Lots of movement. I'm really happy with the development of the branches. I think they're coming along really nice. And the forest planting looks very, very natural. And that's what I like about this forest, is that there's, it doesn't look too contrived or artificial. It looks just like a large forest you'd see in nature. At least that's what I think. So the next step is the cleanup work. Cleaning up all the needles in the landscape, all my branches I pruned off. Finishing clean out all the old needles from the trees. There's still lots hanging on the branches. And I think I might have to clean up some of the lichen on the trunks too. It's getting a little thick, so I might have to get out the toothbrush and do some trunk and branch scrubbing. But I'm very, very happy with the larches. Or larch. I think they're coming along really nicely. Yeah, I think it's a very, very natural looking planting. Here's a look at some of the branches I pruned off. So you can see most of them are just like tips and light branch pruning. There was the one kind of heavy one I took off, but most of the work was just kind of pruning tips back for direction, movement, and taper. To clean up the landscape work, it's just a matter of me coming in with the tweezers and removing needles. It kind of, it takes a while, but it's kind of nice seeing the landscape get cleaned up, revealing all the moss bushes and the sand down here. So it's a good way to spend a quiet afternoon picking needles off your landscape. And there's probably faster ways of doing it, vacuum cleaner or leaf blower or something, but I'm quite happy just to work away, plucking all the needles away by hand. And you can see there's a bit of liverwort in here that I'm going to pull out too. So yeah, sometimes doing things slowly gives you more time to examine what's going on. And it's quite relaxing and quiet. So I'll work away. I'll clean up all these branches I pruned off. There's a good one there. Clean up all these needles, and I don't know if I'll get it finished today in one day, but if I run out of time, well, I'll come back tomorrow and finish it up, and then we'll take a look at the whole forest and kind of examine it, have a critical look at it, see what's going well in the forest and what could be improved, and kind of self-critique. And it's always good to do that with your trees, is to critique them so you know what you can work on in the future for improving it. Kind of have a plan in mind for the future development. I had almost forgotten that there's a waterfall going through the middle of the forest and this water feature out front. It was all covered in needles. It's starting to rain now and it's getting dark out, so I'm going to do a little more work cleaning up the forest tonight, and then I'll come back tomorrow morning and finish it up.